your
We have a quorum, so we have a revised agenda, so people could just follow that. It's set out in front of you. There's been just a few changes over the last day or so.
Switch to
What's that?
it's a new one. Just
a new one.
extra bit.
I like extra bits. Okay, the again, just to remind people in the public gallery to have their devices on silent, so as they don't interfere with the recording of answers. And the meeting will be on camera. Is Alan Chambers' decision?
Alan Chambers, an apology. Yes.
No, an apology from Alan. There were no other apologies that anyone knows of. Expecting Alex along now shortly. Copy of the draft minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of June on page 5. Are people content that that's an accurate reflection of the meeting?
Yes, happy.
Agreed. Chairperson's business. I just seek their agreement for the revised agenda. People content? The revised agenda is in front of you.
Content.
Okay. Launch of partnership between the Open University and the Northern Ireland Council of the Irish Congress of Trade Unions. This event's on Friday morning in the MAC between 11 and 1, and an invitation included all members. I'll be going along for a while of it myself.
Apologies, Mr. Chairman. I'll be busy trying to keep. The United Kingdom and Europe that day.
Well, yeah, fair enough. We wish you well.
We don't. Give me
A waste of a good morning.
a minute,
Okay, as I said, I'll be attending, and there's an open invitation for anyone else who wishes to attend that event. Invitation from NILGA, its flagship conference, Growing Enterprise, Strengthening Communities, is on the 6th of October in the Everglades Hotel in Derry. I'm unable to attend, but the invite is there for members, any members who wish to take it up. It's a bit of a distance ahead, so obviously people can have a look at it. If you have any, are considering going, if you could contact any of the committee staff, they'll be able to advise you, and they'll also then be able to inform the organisers if you wish to go. The external committee meeting next week, just to remind you that we're meeting in the Science Park next Wednesday morning. That meeting begins at 10 o'clock and will be followed by a tour of the pump house and the dry dock, and then lunch at 1 o'clock. So,
does everyone know where to go, Chair?
We sent out a pack
Past the
yesterday. There's an
Titanic.
email pack, and we'll
Keep
do
straight on down past the Titanic
yeah.
and to the end of the road, almost on the left. You can see the car park.
Not mess with it. And there'll be parking close to the building.
And is it just the Science Park entrance
Yes.
itself?
Yes, normal Science Park entrance, and then they'll take us through.
Okay, fair enough.
We can park on site then. Yeah.
Okay.
Quite restricted to parking, so.
At our time when we're arriving, they've got parking spaces.
I'll give you a lift, Gordon.
What's that?
I'll give you a lift.
Thanks.
As we like to say, cooperation.
Thanks, Chair. That's great.
Okay. So, if anyone's not going, by the way, next Wednesday morning, would you notify the committee in advance, because there will be some food provided, and it's just to make sure that we have, as well as visiting these things, we have a committee meeting. We'll be conducting business at that venue as well. Okay. Item 4 is the departmental briefing. We've had, I think this is our 4th. Yeah, please come forward. We have the Derek Baker is the Deputy Secretary of the Strategic Policy Group, Jimon McLean, Director of the Strategic Policy Division 1, and Mary McIver, Director of Strategic Policy Division 2. So I think this is the 4th of these briefings we've had. So we've had the PermSec and 4 Deputy Directors now with yourself. So it's really, I suppose, members, the original chart that we had in terms of the department and the original departmental brief applies to this. But I would just invite maybe Derek to make some opening statement, take us through his area of work, and then we'll allow to open up for members if they have any questions of yourself or any of their team.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for inviting us along today. As you say, I'm Derek Baker. I head up the Strategic Policy Group in the new Department for the Economy, and Mary and Dermot make up 2 of the 3 members of the senior team who will be with me in that group. The 4th member will be a senior economist. We're in the process of appointing that individual. We've had a competition, we've had a successful outcome, and we hope that the new individual will be in post next month. I can't actually disclose the name because I'm not too sure we've gone through the whole process of notifying all the candidates, but we will let you know very soon. But I think that's an important appointment for an economy department, to have a senior economist. I think both Dell and DETI have had very positive experiences of embedding our professional economist and statisticians colleagues right in the policy development and policy evaluation process. We want to continue that. We want to have a strong analytical services unit working not just with our own group but with all parts of the department to help us with our work. So that'll be a very, very useful addition to the team. Chair, I'll just say a little bit about the group. We are a new business area. I don't think there was any direct analogy in either the former Dell or the former DETI, and it's deliberately so. In thinking about creating the new department, there was a very deliberate intention to do something different. So we just didn't bolt the old DETI and the old Dell together and we'd all do what we always did. The concept of a strategic policy group was to draw the strands together, to have an overview and hopefully develop a coherent overview of all of the policies and strategies in the department, make sure that they hung together, and to make sure, importantly, that we integrated the former skills agenda of Dell, or the skills agenda of the former Dell, and the business development agenda of DETI into a coherent whole. We're finding our feet. We're new. A lot of it's new to me. Post-restructuring, I managed to work myself out of a job in restructuring. I was responsible for restructuring departments, so that was a bad result. I was a permanent secretary, and I'm not anymore, but I was a temporary permanent secretary, so it's not too bad. We do
all
have
right,
a day
we're all here in the committee.
There is a danger, if I can horribly misquote the late Muhammad Ali, there is a danger in a group like this that you kind of float like a butterfly and sting like a butterfly. You hover over things and don't actually do stuff, and we have to make sure that that isn't the case. But we do have a day one task, and it's come at us very quickly, and that is to lead the DFE response to the draft programme for government framework, which the executive has published recently. So we have to draw that together, think about it, think about how we organise ourselves and respond to that in concert with all our partners, and I can come back to that later in more detail about the process that we're following if the committee wishes. And in parallel with that, we have to lead the refocus of the executive's economic strategy, and that is a huge piece of work that has to be done very, very quickly. And just to dwell for a moment on the economic strategy, 3 points about that. It's not DFE's strategy, it's the executive's economic strategy. So that means pulling in the contributions from other departments. And you can see where those might be. Education will be hugely important. Communities will be important. Agriculture, environment, rural affairs will be important. Infrastructure will be important. We need to draw those strands together and indeed draw in the relevant elements from the investment strategy. The second point about the economic strategy is we have an existing strategy. It was based on a substantial body of evidence of what works in other small open economies. We need to revisit that, but it is unlikely that that evidence will have changed in 4 years, so it is a refocus, it's not a rewrite, we're not throwing it out, also because it was a long-term strategy. It looked ahead to 2030, but there's lots of things that have come along in the intervening period, and I can go into that in more detail later, but I won't do so now. Issues that we need to address, and then ask the question in respect of each issue, what has changed, and what does that mean for the refocus of the economic strategy? So that's really our day one task, and I think that's going to dominate us between now and the end of the calendar year. The programme for government and the economic strategy, and it'll be all hands on deck to do that, and we need to make sure that the whole department is working in concert to deliver on those things. So I'll stop there, Chair. That's just by way of introduction about what we're about and what our immediate agenda is, but I'm happy to go into the detail of any of those things.
Okay, thank you very much. Just a couple of questions, Mr. Evan. We'll open up for I'm interested in the component parts, your arm's length bodies, your individual colleges, your universities, the tourism bodies, because you've more than one involved. How are they sitting down with the department, getting instruction as to how these new arrangements work? Do they see where they fit in? Are they still of the mindset that they're responsible to the Department of Economy, or do they see themselves in the broader context that you have outlined in terms of the economic strategy, which isn't related to a singular department? And secondly, in relation to the programme for government, I mean, you have a particular responsibility in managing certain areas, certain outcomes in relation to that, which do transcend the Department of the Economy. And from the PermSec down to all of your fellow deputy secretaries have been at pains to point out this is the end of the old silo mentality, which we've been hearing for some time. What appears to be outlaid here it seems very good in theory. I'm just interested in the practice. I mean, if you do have a responsibility for delivering an aspect of the programme for government which does transcend other departments, what authority do you have in other departments to make people responsible for that? You know, I mean, if you lift the phone and say, I want certain things, do they refer on up to their PermSec and say, this guy's interfering in our department's priorities, as the way it did work? I'm answerable to my PermSec, I'm not answerable to you. So, you know, with the theory has to come some expectation, as you say, you want to sting like a bee, not like a butterfly. So how does the sting apply when you need to deliver on the programme for government targets and commitments across a range of departments, where you have that kind of lead responsibility in relation to that?
Okay. Deal with the first issue. I think one of the strengths of the new Department for the Economy is the broader family and the coherence in that. I think we have a very powerful family of partners within the ambit of the department when you think about the colleges and the universities and Tourism NI and Invest NI. And we have brought them together actually in one of the early events to do with the development of the programme for government, and it really was very good to see how everybody coalesced and, you know, identified that this was a new family and a new way of working. And as part of the development of our response, both to the programme for government and developing the economic strategy. Funny, Dermot and I were just chatting earlier over a cup of coffee how we were going to bring that wider family together to work together. And I think people are genuinely excited in developing the structures and preparing for setting up the new department. We had a sort of advisory group of all of those bodies, all of those organisations working with us, giving us their feedback on how we were organising ourselves, our philosophy, our modus operandi, how we wanted to behave and so forth. And we took their input. So I do believe we're getting a genuine esprit de corps in the new departmental family, and I have no concerns about that. In terms of the programme for government and breaking out of silos, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head. That is the key point. This is not just about putting things down on a piece of paper. It's about cultures, it's about behaviours, it's about attitudes. Now, this new mantra of disrespecting boundaries is coming very, very clearly from Malcolm McKibben right down. Through the Permanent Secretaries Group and the Northern Ireland Civil Service Board right down. There have been a number of events with all of the Deputy Secretaries and others who will be the so-called senior responsible owners for the indicators in the draft programme for government, or for groups of indicators already. There's another one this Friday, and the message is really, really clear. It's about connecting. I mean, we even had an odd event at an event 2 Fridays ago where the senior responsible owners had a session of, and I can only describe it as speed dating, where we had to connect in the room very quickly and make sure that we build those links. So, for example, in the process of developing the economic strategy, typical civil service, if in doubt, set up a steering group, but nevertheless I do chair a group of officials who are involved, and we have education there, and we have agriculture there, and we have infrastructure there, and we have communities there, and we have real traction, and they are keen to engage. We have already agreed that in the refocused economic strategy, while skills will still be hugely important, it's not just skills, it's skills and education, because as someone who worked for a while in education and worked in Dell, I can see the absolute importance of the bedrock of education in contributing to economic growth, and we're getting that traction. It's a behavioural thing, it's an attitudinal thing. The proof of the pudding will be in the eating, but we're getting really clear direction from the very senior levels of the civil service and from ministers that this is the way we will behave. So I don't anticipate resistance, and everybody's up for it.
Just final, the departmental boards for each department, are they, I mean, what's the purpose now in this new context? Are they redundant, or, I mean, what's the purpose of them managing a single department or overseeing or, you know, having that responsibility in relation to a single department when we're into a new combined sort of cohesive executive under a cohesive programme for government and budget?
Yeah, I think to the extent that the agenda of departmental boards has focused on governance issues, and I'm not talking about policy issues, I'm talking about governance issues and risk management and making sure that the accountability arrangements are in place and that we have tight financial arrangements, there still is a place for departmental boards managing those issues and providing assurance to accounting officers. But I agree with you that, you know, we need to break out of silos, and the work of a department will not now be constrained within a departmental board. We must be more outward looking, but we still have all the governance and accountability issues in place.
Okay, fair enough. With Steve and then Mervyn.
Okay. Derek, thanks very much indeed. Just a couple of ones. I'm really glad you're recruiting an economist. That's excellent news to have in the Department of the Economy. But I've got a couple of points, but a couple of questions. First one, what are you doing about horizon scanning and future forecasting, particularly with the use of an economist?
Yeah.
And before you have a strategy and before you have a vision and go through all the sort of the rigmarole that goes down beneath that as well, what are we doing about forecasting ahead in Northern Ireland, looking at the major issues out for the next 10, 20, 30 years? It's great that you've had a plan that's going to 2030, and it's great that you're revisiting, but you need to be looking much further than that because of long-term investment decisions. And I would like to hear what your views are and how you're going to bring horizon scanning into the organisation. I'm also interested in who's going to have ownership of the economic strategy. It's going to be an all-government economic strategy. And for that, I think that's a very good idea. But we need to understand who has the ownership of that strategy, who's responsible for the delivery of it, what's the accountability of it, where it's going through as well. And I didn't hear you really talking about external partnerships, because one of the key problems of government sort of organising itself, and I hate to use this horrible phrase, and it's not as bad as not stinging like a bee, but it becomes a self-licking ice cream. And one of the real issues that we have to be very cautious of is that a lot of the behaviours that have got us to this situation before might be reinforced. And the way to do that is I would like you to explain to me how you're looking to build in other external partnerships, particularly from the business sector and the third sector as well. Because that, I believe, would probably be a method of looking to develop that as well. But please, if you could give me some thoughts on that as well. One of the issues as well is sort of how we monitor this process and how we actually benchmark what you're actually doing as well. You know, having, you've heard this mantra before from me as well, but having gone through sort of working in Whitehall quite a long time ago, this sounds exactly what Whitehall went through about 10 to 12 years ago. And I imagine for people who transferred back and forth between the various elements of the civil service and worked in London and the places as well, we seem to be coming to this nearly a decade late. And one of my concerns of that, are we identifying the lessons that occurred during that decade transformational period beforehand and applying them now? Because it sounds great that you seem to have got all the organisational structures and all that sort of, you're working on that, and you're doing the speed dating and you're doing all those little sort of cosy things as well. But generally in the experience of those, it's only when you're actually trying to deliver and get those changes going through, I think that's the important thing. And I would just like to sort of get some sense of what the timeline is, how you're going to make this happen. And as you say yourself, you've got a relatively short period of time to try and achieve this. We've got a relatively short period of time to actually have an economic strategy for Northern Ireland PLC going forward. And you know, I've been talking to a lot of business communities across Northern Ireland over the last couple of weeks. I've been talking to some of the major stakeholders, and there's been no real form of engagement in any form of economic strategy, which I find quite worrying when we're looking into the autumn period when we need to be putting this as a central piece as well. But if you could sort of elucidate some of those points, that would be great. Thanks, Derek.
I think I've remembered all of the main points
Good.
there. I'm still trying to get my head around the concept of a self-licking ice cream.
Yeah, when you think about it, it just gives you... Yeah, somebody used to say it was the civil service, but I won't go that far. Yeah.
Thank you. Just to make a point, it isn't that either Dale or Detty didn't previously have economists. We did. We just didn't have someone at this senior level as an economist, so it's an important addition to our senior team. In terms of horizon scanning, there's a number of things. There are a number of pieces of research that have been commissioned that are underway or will be commissioned as part of a research agenda, and you'll be familiar with some of them. We're trying to update some research on the impact of a lower rate of corporation tax to take account, for example, of the Chancellor's decision to reduce the rate of corporation tax in the UK, so the differentials eroded a little bit, so we'll be looking at the impact of that. Invest Northern Ireland, for example, are commissioning research on the impact of lower rate of corporation tax on the kind of foreign direct investment that we can look to around the world. You know, what kind of companies, what kind of sectors, what countries even should we be looking at, and what are the skills implications of those, and play that into work that we've done on the skills barometer, which is another forward-looking piece of work that we've got in the bank, but which we will update regularly. There is the work of the Matrix panel, which looks at sort of high technology sectors and looks ahead, identifies the growth sectors and looks ahead at the components of those and what are the kind of actions that need to be taken by all players so that we can meet the needs of those sectors now, but more importantly, into the future. So there's a lot of different pieces of research on horizon scanning going on, which will play into the development of the economic strategy.
Just to interject there, Derek, you've mentioned 4 separate strands. Is there a coordinating function within the department
There is.
that's actually going to bring those together?
I chair a group which looks at the whole research agenda for the Department for the Economy, and indeed we would hope to come to this committee very soon with that research agenda to brief the committee on what our proposals are for the incoming year. And then, because we've got a sort of, this is a transitional year, there's a 1-year budget, there'll be a 1-year business plan, we've got an immediate research agenda, but then we want to develop a longer term research agenda as well for the future. But we have a research agenda for the immediate future, and we'll come to the committee with
I'd
that.
be delighted that, and I would encourage you to look out to maybe 2050, because indeed some of the investment decisions on new power plants and grid and things like that will go out to that length of time. So if you could, if you're looking at 10, 15, 20-year horizons, maybe sort of take a benchmark of 2050. I think that would be quite useful, and we'd be delighted to listen to the perspective on that.
I think one of your, and I might not be taking these in order, apologies, you asked about accountability for and ownership of the economic strategy. Well, it is an executive strategy, but Minister Simon Hamilton will take the lead in that strategy and in presenting it to the executive. So the Department for the Economy will have the coordinating role, the lead role for that strategy, even though it will have to draw in all parts of the executive, and that's where the accountability will rest.
And Mayor, through the chair there, I think that would be a good opportunity for the committee to talk with the Minister as he's going forward with his thinking, for us to get a view and perspective of where that's developing, and rather than just being presented with at the end. If we're developing this as we go forward, I think it would be quite useful if we as a committee would be in a position to listen to some of those views as they come through.
And certainly relay that back to the Minister. In terms of partnerships, you're absolutely right. I mean, maybe I didn't make, you're absolutely right. I didn't make the point at the start, but again, Dermot and I were just talking about this. Delivery of this economic strategy will go much beyond DFE and the DFE family into a wide range of partners. For example, the role of local councils and their wider powers in community planning, and specifically in business startup. How do we engage those? All of the councils, the business organisations, what do they bring to the table? We have a whole raft of partners in the voluntary and community sectors, and indeed in the private sectors, and we work with those sectors in delivering training. And we do plan to engage with all of those partners, even in advance of the preparation of a draft economic strategy, which will go out for formal consultation in the autumn, so everybody will have a go at commenting on it. But before we get to that point, we want to engage with them all, and we will be engaging with them all over the course of the summer. And indeed, we're meeting tomorrow morning to decide just how we go about that process.
And just to, again, just some perspective on it, it might be useful because the business community and the sort of companies are really asking about what's happening and what's going on, and they don't feel it's been engaged with as well. I might encourage, and if you might pass back to the Minister, the idea of talking to some in the business community to act as a champion for the process of going forward as well.
Yeah.
Because you'll find there's so many disparate moving parts, just as many, you seem to have reeled off about 20 or 30 civil service moving parts. There's many moving parts on the other side. But actually getting somebody to act as a champion might be very useful. And doing that very soon would be, I think, would be quite a positive development.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, I think you asked about lessons learned. In the process of developing the approach to the programme for government, the outcome-based approach to the programme for government, there has been really heavy engagement with Scotland, because they have gone there about 5 or 6 years ahead of us in developing this approach, as you probably, and indeed more recently Wales. And there has been a lot of engagement with both. We've had a lot of very helpful input from Scotland. 2 former permanent secretaries of the Scottish Government Executive have come over and actually offered their support free of charge to help us and sit with us and observe us and offer their opinions and give their lessons. Well, you know what? This is where we made mistakes, and this is where you might avoid making mistakes or commenting on how we're doing this. So we fully appreciate that this is new territory for us. Others have tried it, others have learned lessons, and we're trying to play that in as we go. I think those are the 4 points, but I'm not altogether sure.
Thanks very much today. Cheers,
Okay,
Jerry.
thank you.
Okay, thanks. Mervyn?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Derek, for your presentation, and also welcome to your colleagues in the department. Obviously, strategies and policies are all very good, and the system loves to be pushing paper around, and it is always a challenge for us to try and weed out really what is going on in the overall strategy. However, one of the biggest issues that we face is the delivery. So we have a strategy, we then move to a policy, and then we move to implementation.
Yep.
The planning system
Yep.
is not fit for purpose in terms of one issue, speed. It is, I think, disgraceful that we still have, despite all the efforts that have been made with various ministers over a period of time, we have a planning system that allows major economic planning decisions to sit in the system for months and months and months and years. We end up in a situation in my constituency where some developers, some business people said, this, it's not worth it, and walked away. If we take the most contentious one, and I accept that there can be issues of concern raised by planning applications, but in terms of economic input, one application sat in my constituency for 12 years. I just think that's disgraceful. They ended up going to court, and of course every issue that was raised by those that took the application to court was thrown out at a huge amount of money. And if there had been sense and there had been common sense, we would have been in a different place. What has happened now, our project has fallen apart, and the investment in my constituency has disappeared. Now, given that the Department of Infrastructure has responsibility in conjunction with the Council for planning, and the key element of the Department for the Economy is about driving forward and encouraging businesses to invest, what assurances can we give them that in terms of breaking down the silo mentality, and we don't envisage any resistance, the planning service is actually going to be fit for purpose, that when an application comes in, it's turned around, it's decided on, and we're not still looking at it in 4 years' time, and somebody in an office in a planning service has to look under the table where that is. What are we actually doing with it? So I get really frustrated with the planning service.
Okay. I'm going to do what civil servants do best, and that's pass the buck on this one, Mr. Story, but because I don't want to comment on the planning service because it's not within my direct bailiwick, but I do take your point entirely, that if our economic strategy is to have any teeth and be effective, well then the whole regulatory environment, if I can use that generic term, has to work. Now that's stuff that happens within DFE, that's employment law, That's trading standards, that's consumer affairs and so forth has to work well, business regulation, but the wider environment needs to work. And I will take the point that you've made back into the group that I work with and the other departments that I work with as a specific action point to look at in the context of the economic strategy. I can't give you any guarantees about the planning service. I just can't do that. It's outside my direct bailiwick. But what I can guarantee you is that I will raise the issue with my infrastructure colleagues to make sure that as it's played into the economic strategy, we address those points.
But is there not, in a sense, Derek, a contradiction in terms? If on one hand we say that we're now going to not envisage any resistance and we're working outside the silo, that it's not then within your bailiwick to actually, when I accept out of this departmental responsibility, but surely if there was a major investor came and I can think of a number of key sites in my own constituency, and I think we all know the ones I'm referring to, and they said we want to do A, B and C. We're bringing 1,500 jobs, we're bringing 3,000 jobs, but it will require some planning amendments or plan. I would despair.
Yeah.
I really would, because it would go into the system and 6 months later, it could be 6 years later, and business doesn't work at the speed that they operate in the planning service.
Yeah.
If they did, they wouldn't be in business. And I just wonder, and of course there was attempts made in the past and then allegations were made that this was people trying to be, to advance their own personal gain. This is not about trying to be in favour of any one individual company or organisation over and above anybody else. It's about having a system that's fit for purpose, as it seems to be in other places. When a major investor comes, or a developer, even a small investor, says, I want to do this to improve my business.
Yeah.
6 months later, they're still waiting for an answer.
Yeah.
You know, to the extent that one company that I'm aware of decided, went on ahead, did what it had to do, then told the planners, and then fought the enforcement issue for 3 years. But during that 3 years, when ultimately they won, their business was continuing.
Yeah.
And I think that's the mentality that we need to break in terms of the attitude that people have.
Well, I mean, I agree entirely that, you know, if we're serious about an economic strategy which is going to promote business growth and which is going to rebalance the economy away from the public sector towards the private sector, we need to have a system that works well and works efficiently and works fast and is agile and responds to the needs of business with, albeit, the appropriate protections built in. The only commitment I can give you in this specific issue in planning is that it is an issue that I will take up with my colleagues in the context of developing that strategy.
Thank you. Stephen?
Thanks, Chair. Just to go back to your opening comments, and I'm sure Derek will thank me for this one, but the outgoing economic strategy, or the current economic strategy to be refreshed, is fundamentally still an input-based process in the sense that it was a detailed list of various commitments from departments and a series of targets. It was more comprehensive than the previous programme for government, which was a bit random at times in terms of the commitments that were made. But how do we reconcile what is still fundamentally a refreshment of what is still a live and relevant document with what is now going to be an outcome, output, focused programme for government?
Well, one of the exam questions we have to set out, thank you for that question. I nearly called you Minister there. One of the questions we have to set ourselves in looking at the economic strategy, and there's a whole list of things, but what policy context has changed, you know, that causes us to reflect on the economic strategy. And there are various things. Obviously, we have a decision on corporation tax, which is new. But the big thing that's different is we have a draft programme for government framework, which we maybe didn't have before, which is outcome-based. So we need to reflect on that and how does that play into the economic strategy. And there's a number of things in that programme for government which are really relevant to the economic strategy. They're pretty obvious, but you know, you could probably look at half of the indicators in there, but there are some that are very specific. Thank you, Dermot. And there are issues around regional growth, for example, which is new. We have issues around competitiveness and so forth. We have been looking to see how we can map those programme for government outcomes and indicators in the draft programme to the economic strategy and how they relate to each other, so that we can make sure that this refreshed economic strategy is focused on those outcomes and is not just a list of inputs. Now, we haven't done that work yet. We haven't completed that work. I look at this economic strategy as some poor soul, and it's appropriate at this time of year, having to do a big essay or something, you know, and you're gathering all your research and you've got all your papers and books around you, but you haven't actually put pen to paper yet, but you know what you have to do. You just have to start doing it. But we have the programme for government indicators to guide us, I think, and that is the difference this time round, and we have to make sure the strategy relates to that. But at the end of the day, you know, a strategy, you know, we have all kinds of terms here, strategies and plans and everything else, and I know we're coming down with strategies and it looks like paper, but it is about setting your vision and what you're going to do to deliver that vision. There will be an element of inputs in there, because we're going to have to specify what is it we're going to do and what will it look like and how will we know when we have done it, and we hope to have that in the economic strategy across all the dimensions of it.
Yeah, and just as a follow-up to that, the current strategy is also very much based around two pillars, one of rebalancing and one of rebuilding, and obviously in the context of 2011, the executive found itself in dealing with what was a very deep downturn at that time. Again, this morning we've more good news in terms of the employment rate figures and unemployment falling. So things are moving well in terms of the rebuilding.
Yeah.
So are we likely to see a stronger focus or a shift in focus more towards the rebalancing work as opposed to the rebuilding work in terms of...
That's one of our questions, one of our issues. You know, how has the context changed? You're absolutely right. The strategy was written in the teeth of the effects of recession. Things have got a bit better. They're not dramatically better, but there has been steady improvement. And you're right, today's labour market statistics are all going in the right direction. So, question for ourselves and for the Minister and for the Executive, are those twin pillars appropriate anymore, or do we need to shift more towards the rebalancing of the economy, the medium to long-term measures, and we move away from the short-term rebuilding, which was all about, as you well know, short-term protection of jobs, because things were really bad then. My gut instinct at this stage, without wanting to prejudice the answer, is that we move towards rebalancing. We're looking towards the long term.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, Alex.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Derek, and your team. Just in terms of, I know it's obviously very important, the long-term plan and the horizon scanning, as it was called earlier. But there's obviously a need to do things shorter and medium term as well. And you often hear commentators saying, "Oh, there's not enough people here aren't skilled enough to take up jobs coming in," and so on and so forth. And there isn't enough planning or pre-planning. So how do you actually project ahead 5 years or 10 years time? You know, because you can't turn around the education system overnight, or the further education or the skills sector. So how do we have confidence that you've bottomed out the process of long-term planning and projecting ahead, yes, but also preparing people in the shorter, the medium term to be able to be skilled enough and educated enough to have the jobs that are likely to come their way?
Yeah, well, actually, we're probably in better shape there than many other regions, because, sparing his blushes, a piece of innovative work which your colleague beside you initiated when he was the Minister for Employment and Learning, we commissioned the Centre for Economic Policy at Ulster University to develop a thing called the Skills Barometer, which is actually looking in a very detailed way at all levels of skills, from the lowest levels right up to doctorate level, and across all sectors, what our skills needs are both now and in the longer term. And we have a good handle on that. Now, that is not a static piece of work. It was done at a point in time, but it will continuously be updated as we're looking ahead. And I mentioned a piece of work that Invest Northern Ireland is doing to look at the impact of corporation tax on their inward investment and the sectors they'd want to attract. Well, when we get the outcome of that, and we'll get the outcome of that over the next few weeks, we will play that into the skills barometer so it can be updated, so that we're looking ahead at the kinds of skills we need and at what levels we need those skills. Now, you make a very valid point. To produce people with the level of skills doesn't happen like that. We do have short-term measures in place which we can deliver, say, for Company X coming in, and they want 50 widget makers and they want them in 6 months, and we have mechanisms in place to do that. Working with the universities or the further education colleges, we can put in place what we call academies or short-term programs to convert people who maybe are qualified in one degree and turn them into widget makers. But in terms of the long-term pipeline, If you're talking about an undergraduate starting now, well, it's a 3-year course, a 4-year course, so you need to be investing now in those skills at, say, higher education level or even a further education level. Maybe the time horizon isn't just as long. So we do need to have the forward look so that we can invest now and start turning the super tanker around, you know, at further education and higher education. But I think because of the work that has been done on the skills barometer, which is really, really detailed, we're in better shape than many other parts of the United Kingdom. And then there's other work that plays into it too. There's a very, very detailed piece of work, an employer survey done by the UK Commission for Employers and for Employment and Skills, and they survey 4,000 local businesses, and we get a good handle on what the skills shortages are from the business perspective, and that plays into our thinking too.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you.
Maybe I could just add to that, in terms of the indicator that we're looking at in skills, it is to raise the skills at every level in the population. And there are 2 big ways to do that. One is the people who are about to enter work, so that's your further education, your training, your universities. And this is where the skills barometer is really valuable in helping us construct what we would call a skills pipeline. So you're almost producing people for the jobs that will be there in 3 and 4 and 5 years' time. The other element to it then is people who are in work. Because if you're going to raise the skills levels of the population, most of the people in the population are in some form of work. So we also then have to look at how we work closely with employers to make sure that the opportunities are there for people who are in work to get the skills. So that's the other element of that as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Gordon Dunn.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks very much. Welcome to this new setup and all the challenges that you face. Just, I appreciate you're not long in the job, but how do you see the priorities? I know we've listed a lot of things, and how do you see the priorities working out in relation to, obviously there's a big focus on skills. I've noticed that in this coming from the old committee, we've had a lot of the, whether it's perhaps the former minister over there's influence and things, but what about the focus on the economy, supporting existing business, trying to, obviously the big challenge is corporation tax and all the flow from that for new jobs. But I think what is important is the point about supporting existing businesses where margins are getting ever tighter and trying to make sure that we can keep what we've got. I think needs to be a priority. The tourism is starting to develop. I think we all welcome the work that you're doing, that is being done between Invest NI and tourism. NI, I think, is important, and I think it's a great way to utilise resources and not to duplicate resources. And I think those need to be priorities. And of course, exports. Exports have always been something that we have exercised ourselves in this committee. We need to do more to try and increase our export base. And innovation, R&D. To me, those are issues that need a focus on. And skills is certainly important, and I appreciate that, but I think those issues need to be certainly well up there.
Apologies if I've given an impression that I'm a bit obsessed with skills. Maybe it's because I
Well, I know
you know.
you're passionate for it, I understand, but I appreciate that.
I agree with you in terms of priorities. I mean, the economic strategy, to the extent that, you know, I can look ahead, will not focus exclusively on skills. I mean, actually, all of the things that you mentioned will be core building blocks in terms of their contribution to economic growth. There will be a big emphasis on innovation, and that's innovation in its widest sense. It's not just R&D. It's about innovation and creativity, including in the public sector, but right across the economy in everything that we do. And indeed, as part of the process of testing how this brave new world of an outcome-focused programme for government will work and indicators, we have been, and Dermot has been, leading on a pathfinder on innovation with lots of partners from the private sector and from other agencies, just to see how we can develop an action plan that will play into the economic strategy. So you're right, innovation will feature strongly in the economic strategy. Infrastructure will continue to feature strongly. We get that, all the representation we get from you know, the CBI, we've had submissions from Manufacturing NI, from the Institute of Directors, from the Chamber of Commerce. Economic infrastructure is really important. The international component, and if I can, you know, there's different dimensions to that. That is foreign direct investment coming in. It is also exports going out. And I mean, since the last economic strategy, we have developed an Export Matters Action Plan to try and promote exports, and exports have been going up. But it's also tourism. And there is a draft tourism strategy in gestation in the department, which I'm sure will come to the committee in due course, but that will be a component of the economic strategy. It will contribute towards it. So, and business support, you know, a generally supportive environment for business. We've talked about that with Mr. Story, but also just direct business support, whether it's through councils for start-up or through the activities of Invest NI. All of those issues will feature in the economic strategy. In terms of prioritisation between them, I think it'll not be a case of picking one over another. I think they'll all be given equal weight. And, you know, we will have to make sure that we move forward on all of those fronts simultaneously. So hopefully we won't be leaving anything behind. That is an important contributor to economic growth.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'm sure we'll be talking to you again in due course at some stage, but that's been helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
The other officials there, or so that's a good skip in. They are outside.
Yes. Left your imprint there.
Those jobs are not easy.
Okay, members, we move on. Item 5 is a further briefing. Again, the briefing papers at page 19, specifically pages 25 and 26 apply. At page 4 of the table pack also is a copy of the Finance Minister's statement to the Assembly on the June monitoring round. And page 19 is a table showing the reduced requirements. Page 21 is a table showing the monitoring round allocations. And page 28 of the table pack show the department's non-ring fence and ring fence resource DEL. And page 29 shows the department's capital DEL. And the reason I highlight this is because we have in front of us is the Trevor Cooper is the Director of Higher Education and Finance. Philip Crumley is the Head of HE Finance, and Colin Jack is Director of European Fund Management. Just to remember, on the first day of the committee, when we did get a briefing from the Permanent Secretary, we had a briefing from Heather Cousins, who's, I think, in Macedonia, is it, that she's going to?
Yes, I think she's completed that trip. I think she's actually on leave at the minute, Chair.
Okay. Well, that give a brief overview of your sector within the department, but this is an opportunity, obviously, to delve a little bit deeper into all of that. So you're very welcome. Just invite whoever's taking the lead to make the opening statement, and we'll take questions from that.
Well, Chair, if you'll indulge us, I think we'll probably cover our own responsibilities. So Trevor and myself. So I'll cover the European fund management issues first. The department is responsible for the two structural funds programmes in Northern Ireland, which make up under the current round of funding, which is 2014 to 20, the Investment for Growth and Jobs programme. So by coincidence of mathematics, both of those programmes are worth a total of €513 million over the 7-year period. There are different intervention rates for the two. There's a 40% intervention rate for the European Social Fund programme and a 60% intervention rate for the European Regional Development Fund programme. So we receive €205 million for ESF and €308 million for ERDF. That's the main focus of the division's work at the moment. We also have a significant programme of work to close down the 2007 to 13 programmes, which were called the Sustainable Competitiveness Programme. There was a slightly different balance last time round. ESF had 189 million euros, ERDF 286 million euros, which resulted in total programmes of 473 million for ESF and 566 for ERDF. So the total values have been more or less the same for the two periods. In the UK, European funding is administered at regional level, so each of the devolved administrations administers its own structural funds programmes. In England, they have regional structures to administer ERDF, and the arrangement is that we have a direct relationship with the European Commission, with the various Directorates General that are responsible for the different funds. DG Regio has an overall responsibility for structural funds policy and a specific responsibility for ERDF, and DG Employ is responsible for the European Social Fund. And the programmes were designed over the period sort of 2012 to 2013, and both have gone live really in the 2015-16 financial year. When we were designing the programmes, there was a set of 11 thematic objectives which covered the structural funds across Europe. And the Northern Ireland programmes, there was the opportunity to focus on particular thematic objectives. So under the ERDF, we concentrated on thematic objective 1, which is research, technological development and innovation. Thematic objective 3, which is about competitiveness of small and medium enterprises, and thematic objective 4, which is about the shift towards a low carbon economy. And under ESF, we focused on thematic objective 8, which is about access to employment and employability. Thematic objective 9, which is about social inclusion, and thematic objective 10, which is about skills for growth. There are a broad range of activities that are eligible under both programmes. The programmes are structured slightly differently in terms of the number of projects that are supported. The European Social Fund programme under priorities 1 and 2, which map to thematic objectives 8 and 9, supports a range of projects which are run through an open call by the department, and those projects are delivered by a range of organisations, but predominantly voluntary and community sector organisations, but there are some projects run by FE colleges and councils and one or two other public sector organisations. So we're currently supporting 66 projects under that open call. Priority 3 provides support for apprenticeships and youth training. In terms of the ERDF programme, the number of projects which tends to be supported is a mixture of some quite large flagship projects and some of the types of projects that were supported under the 2007-13 programme included the Giant's Causeway Visitor Centre, the extension to the Waterfront Hall. There's significant investment in new buses and the refurbishment of the Enterprise trains. But there are also much smaller grants administered by InvestNI for small and medium businesses and indeed larger businesses. So there are research and development grants, and one of the areas where Northern Ireland has been quite innovative in terms of the European Regional Development Fund is in offering financial instruments which are funds to a particular type of businesses that are administered through InvestNI. But just to give you an idea of how the two programmes differ, there were about 2,500 projects supported under the ERDF programme from 2007 to 13. So the fund does have quite a wide reach. So in terms of just where we are at the moment in terms of commitment of the funds under the current programmes, offers worth a total of 29 million ERDF have been made by Invest NI under the research and development schemes. Just under 9 million has been committed under the competitiveness of small and medium enterprises strand, and 7.5 million of that is through the 5 financial instruments, the investment funds. On ESF, we have just over £100 million offered, and that's the total programme value to currently 65 projects. There were offers originally made to 67 and a couple have dropped out. We also have funding offered to the Apprenticeships NI programme, and the plan is that we will support in the future the new model of apprenticeships and traineeships that the department is developing. So just briefly to mention some of the main challenges I suppose that we face. One of them is to meet the expenditure targets set by the Commission, and at the moment we're on track to do that. But that's always something that we need to keep a close eye on. We have one strand of the ERDF programme, the low carbon strand, where it had been planned to support an energy project, a grid strengthening project, which is now not going to be possible to support through ERDF, and discussions have just begun about replacing that. The project that we are seeking to negotiate with the Commission currently is support for the Belfast Rapid Transit project, but that will be subject to Commission approval. In terms of both funds, a new feature of this round of funding is a performance reserve, which is 6% of the total programme value, and an assessment of how we're performing against all the targets will be made in 2018. There are ongoing financial management issues, particularly in relation to exchange rates, but we've also, with both programmes, we had difficulties during the 7 to 13 programme in terms of making sure that the programmes complied with all Commission audit requirements. There's a very heavy audit regime with both. The problems arose a little bit earlier in the ERDF programme, and one of the consequences of that was to shift €23 million from ERDF to ESF during the course of the programme. On ESF, the problems really emerged early last year, 2015, and there's been very significant work undertaken by the department to bring new expenditure into the programme through the Training for Success and programme-led apprenticeships programmes. All that expenditure was paid by the department by the deadline of the 31st of December 2015, but we're now against a very tight deadline to close both programmes financially fully by the 31st of March 2017, and we're in the process of making the final claims to the Commission at present, and those then need to be audited. That's most of what I have to say about ESF and ERDF, and I'll just mention very briefly one additional role that the division has, which is to be accountable department for part of the Interreg 5A programme, and that's a programme which is a cross-border, and indeed Scotland is involved as well as the two jurisdictions, north and south, and there are two strands in the research and innovation theme for which DFE is the accountable department, and that's a role that we carry out in conjunction with the Special EU Programmes body, and there's 15 million of ERDF in those strands that DFE is accountable department for. So those are my initial comments, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, well, do you want to present each, and then we'll take questions in the round? I just advise if people wish to try and draw Colin into the Brexit debate, he can't go there. It's forbidden under Purdah. So keep it fixed to the issues that he's in with. We'll debate the politics of Brexit.
Don't worry, Mr. Chairman. We'll find a way around it.
Trevor or Philip, whoever's.
Thank you, Chair. I'll give you a brief overview of the structure of the division, the key activities and the key stakeholders that the division engages with. So the division has a team of 47 people and it's responsible for the oversight of funding in 16-17, totalling 448 million resource, 37 million capital. Now that's prior to any adjustments that might arise out of yesterday's monitoring round outcome. We also oversee the disbursement of student loans through the Student Loan Company, and that is forecast to be around about £326 million in 16-17. Our key immediate partners are the 3 universities which operate locally, 6 further education colleges which deliver higher education courses in association with the universities, the 2 university teaching colleges, the Northern Ireland Science Park, InvestNI, and obviously the broader business space in terms of the collaborative opportunities there are between business and the educational institutions. Whilst we do provide core funding to the universities, this represents around, I think Heather indicated to you in her briefing, this represents around 37% of their income, with majority coming from students via fees, from research income and from endowments. So the universities are autonomous bodies, and indeed that's the case also with the Northern Ireland Science Park. It's a company limited by guarantee, and the department has no control. It's not an NDPB. The department doesn't control the Northern Ireland Science Park. So that reinforces the need for a constructive partnership approach as being key in terms of our engagement with these bodies. And I think one of the things that I've been struck by since entering post on the creation of the department is the strength of the existing relationships that the division has with our partner institutions. And I think this firm, Bedrock, presents a major opportunity within the context of the new department to further develop their role and their linkages within the context of the developing refreshed programme for government, the refreshed economic strategy and the broad innovation agenda. And I know they recognise the key role that they have in terms of delivery of economic growth through delivery of high-level skills, world-class research and innovation, through the exploitation of collaborative opportunities with the private sector, indeed the public sector and the third sector as well. And in the case of the Science Park, through assisting in the provision of an ecosystem which operates and fosters promoting growth in the knowledge economy. As regards to the division itself, we have 8 functional areas, so I'll just give you a brief overview of each of them. Firstly, in relation to the student support team, the department, by way of the Student Loan Company, is responsible for the provision of support to over 65,000 undergraduate Northern Ireland students. Additionally, the department awards non-repayable means-tested grants for maintenance. Means-tested grants targeted those with caring responsibilities, and non-means-tested grants to assist disabled students to study. Second area of responsibility is managed by a dedicated team which and oversees the implementation of the department's approach to widening participation in regard to the accessibility of higher education by underrepresented groups such as disabled persons. Philip, beside me, is the leader of the HE Finance team, which is responsible for oversight of our resource and capital DEL block grant funding to our institutions and our wider oversight and governance arrangements with those bodies. Philip's team is also a new responsibility that Philip's taken on recently. He's responsible for interaction with the Northern Ireland Science Park, and both Philip and I met the team at the Science Park yesterday and were hugely impressed by their success to date, their ambition and their desire to be involved in fostering and growth of the knowledge economy. So they're right in the middle of our innovation strategy. Higher Education Policy Branch, in conjunction with input from a number of elements of the division, is responsible for a number of key policy areas. including the overall funding landscape of the sector. And, I think we know that there are challenges there. Economically and socially relevant provision by the sector, teaching and learning policy, including the Teaching Excellence Framework, and the provision of higher education information to enable benchmarking with peer institutions. We have a team also who work on initial teacher education policy, and their remit includes teacher education landscape, quality assurance policy, and the funding and management of quality assessment arrangements in the space. Team is also responsible for activities which contribute to ensuring a high-quality learning experience, such as via support for activity intended to increase percentage of students undertaking things like work placements, which are pretty important in terms of their progression to future employment. Our research policy team is very much focused on the research and innovation agenda, which is a key priority within the draft programme for government. Key areas of this team are core funding for quality-related research, liaison with universities in relation to Horizon 2020, which is a major EU programme which funds collaborative research. HE collaboration with business in regard to that programme through funding of the Connect programme and support for international research. Our student mobility branch looks at the area of HE internationalisation and student and staff mobility. So it's important that our qualifications are recognised in other jurisdictions, and if our students wish to study, then they've got a fair opportunity to do so. Finally, we have a team responsible for oversight of the management of the projects set up in support of the graduating to success and access to success strategies that under the previous STEL department. So hopefully that gives you a pretty high-level overview of the division and its activities and responsibilities. Happy to take questions.
Oh, yeah. If you have any of that, or are you just happy to chip in when the questions are raised? Fair enough. Thanks very much. Well, just we have a couple of people down for in relation to the EU programme, the funding. I mean, one of the big hang-ups with the SEUPB stuff, and you have a linkage in there, has been the turnaround time, which has impacted on, I suppose, the ability to spend out the money, and also the willingness of people to go through the process of applying. Is there a similar difficulty in the ASF and the ERDF that you find is, I mean, you're obviously dealing with, in one case, thousands of projects, so I assume there's a more efficient means of getting through applications, assessing them and getting the money spent than perhaps exists on the SEUPB. But you did say you're on target to spend out the allocation that you have. So is it a more efficient means of dealing with them?
I mean, I wouldn't like to comment on another.
I'm not saying the other ones
organisations.
Is there a similar turnaround time in terms of application and actually getting access to finance and the ability to spend the finance on the ground?
The turnaround time is probably not as long as that, but the turnaround times probably reflect the size of the projects that are being applied for. I mean, the ERDF is administered a good bit of it, about half of it, by Invest NI, and it's through ongoing programmes that businesses apply for, and approvals of the business cases for those programmes are done at programme level. So the turnaround times are probably not as significant. I'd need to get some information specifically about turnaround times by Invest NI. But I'm not aware of particular criticism there. In terms of ESF, the way that we have administered the programme is through calls for applications, usually twice during the course of a programme. So we held a call in late 2014, over the beginning of 2015, for the first 3 years of the programme, and that's under priorities 1 and 2, which together account for 60% of the programme. And we were very committed to trying to make sure that there were offers of funding made to organisations before the 31st of March 2015 so that they had money available from 1st of April. Now, there were twists and turns in that process. One of the members of the committee would be very familiar with. I mean, it turned out that we were much closer to the 31st of March in terms of those offers being made than we had hoped. And we will be seeking to learn lessons from that process for the next call, which will govern funding from the 1st of April 2018. But I mean, we did get it turned around in time. In terms of the internal departmental programmes which are supported, I mean, those are all programmes that have business case approval, and so the process of getting the European funding allocated to those projects is perhaps a little more streamlined, but nonetheless it's quite rigorous. I mean, the projects have to be considered by selection panels. They have to demonstrate that they've met all the criteria of the programme, and there have to be those business cases in place. So, I mean, there are complicated audit regimes that do take time to meet, but certainly we're seeking to make sure that our processes are as streamlined as they can be.
You mentioned that who decides really that there are a range of priorities decided in each programme by the European Union. You decide to pick certain priorities for yourself to allocate against those. Is that the department's call, the minister's call?
I mean, at the end of the day, certainly the ministers who are responsible have a key role in approving the draft programmes that are submitted. But there is a programme monitoring committee which actually spans the two programmes, which is needs to approve any changes to the programme, which then are ultimately submitted to the Commission for approval. So the programmes are agreed between the departments, the managing authorities. We have an ERDF managing authority and an ESF managing authority, and the programmes need to be agreed with the Commission. And indeed, there was a process where the former Department of Finance and Personnel, now the Department of Finance, has a role as member state in relation to all the structural funds programmes, which include also the European Agriculture Fund for Rural Development and the other structural funds programmes, the transnational programmes. So there was an executive approval process in there as well. So, and I mean, both programmes were developed through consultation. So there's quite because they are for a 7-year period and they do involve significant tranches of funding. So there's a need for a robust consultation process as well.
Okay, I could just ask briefly, Trevor, obviously there's significant pressure on funding for higher education. A part of your remit to explore with them how they could assist in the process of attracting more business in and being able to generate some of their own income as well, or is it just simply to try and manage the budget that is available to you to pass through to higher education?
No, well, I think certainly our remit would expand into those sorts of areas. The more income the universities can generate, obviously the less pressures that they would have in terms of trying to fulfil their own ambitions, and really key opportunities in terms of research linkages with business, trying to promote that would be part of the remit. But I don't think that's potentially the overall solution. I think the Minister said he'll be looking at the various options, considering them very carefully. I know he's going to meet with the Vice-Chancellors on the issue and meet with other stakeholders before coming to a position on it.
Okay, thanks. Kiva?
Thanks. Thanks for your presentation. Just a couple of questions on the EU funding aspect. You mentioned who's responsible for ESF and ERDF. Is it like a specific unit within the department that oversees all of EU funding? And and does that tie in then with the executive office in Brussels? And do we have specific targets for competitive funding drawdown within Horizon 2020? And the H2020 NI that was the responsibility of Dell and DEDI, has that obviously now come into to your department then?
Okay. I mean, first, the answer to the first question is yes. My division, which has about 60 staff, is responsible for both the ESF and ERDF programmes, and also has the accountable department role in relation to that element of Interreg, and there is an ERDF managing authority and an ESF managing authority, and then we also have an ESF delivery branch which administers and relates directly to the organisations that have the project. So there are 65 organisations, largely found in the community sector, where there's that direct relationship. We do link in with the Executive Office in Brussels, and I mean they facilitate some of our communication with the Commission, although we have a lot of direct communication with the Commission as well. In terms of competitive funding, that's not actually a role for my division. There's a team within the Strategic Policy Directorate who are responsible for promoting meeting the Executive's targets on maximising competitive funding drawdown. But clearly one of the big areas for competitive funding is through the Horizon 2020 research programme and Erasmus Plus, where there's a higher education element. So Trevor might want to say a bit about
just
that.
in terms, you asked about the target for drawdown of that. There's a target of €145 million up to 2020. In terms of how we've done to date, as at November 2015, the overall drawdown was around about €52 million. The predominant element of that related to universities in collaboration with partners. Around about just over 6 million of that related to private sector businesses, mainly SMEs. It's a very, very competitive process, and you know when it talks about being targeted SMEs, probably our comparator regions would be the sort of higher level SMEs that that would be successful in it. But one of the key areas that we're going to be looking at over the next number of months in terms of the whole innovation agenda is options in terms of how we can increase the uptake of Horizon 2020 by SMEs, local business. But SMEs in terms of the funding that is drawn down by business probably I think it's around about 74% of the funding that we draw down of that 6 million.
And is there any function then for helping those who want to draw down Horizon 2020 to connect and to help with the administration of the applications? And
sure, we've funded a Connect programme. I think it's got 7 contact points which assist business and universities linking up, and in the whole Horizon 2020 process, I think there's £1.3 million has been allocated towards that.
I mean, and clearly your question highlights the distinction between the structural funds, the ESF and the ERDF, where we're entitled to that money as of right, and the other programmes where there is the scope to get as much as we can secure. There's no limit to that. I mean, I know from my previous post in the Department for Employment and Learning, where I did have that responsibility, that, for example, under the Erasmus Plus programme, Northern Ireland draws down a significantly higher amount of money per head of population under the Erasmus Plus programme than other parts of the UK, certainly.
Okay. Steve?
I'm sort of avoiding the sort of Brexit minefield very carefully as well. Colin, just a quick one. Invest, particularly R&D and support for SMEs, is one of the critical things we're looking at going forward as well. What proportion of your funding line do you think that Invest put towards R&D and also for SME support?
The R&D element of the programme, we have targets in terms of expenditure And so by the end of the programme in 2023, we're aiming to have spent €189 million on R&D. And then there's 226 million on competitiveness of SMEs. So there's this, and I mean that's out of the 513 million total. So there's it's about 40% of the programme is on R&D.
That's a considerable amount of investment in R&D for Invest, and particularly Invest is going to be the driving force for sort of our delivering the economic strategy going forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll not draw the dots.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Just on the grid strengthening programme, that obviously has been identified as a priority. Did you say funding was not available for that, or unlikely to become available? So we're going to have to look at alternatives, are we?
Yes, and I mean the alternative project which has been identified potentially for the low carbon theme is the Belfast Rapid Transit project, but that's subject to negotiation with the Commission.
So that is that's an alternative project for the funding?
An alternative project that would be eligible for the funding.
Yes,
I mean, just because, I mean, my colleagues on the energy side of the department will be able to talk about grid strengthening. Just because it hasn't proved suitable for ERDF funding doesn't mean that it won't happen necessarily, but just that there isn't a good fit between that particular project and the programme.
Yeah, so you're not able to give us any more details on the grid strengthening issues really, and the need for movement on it, because we're aware that it is a big issue.
That's a question on that.
Yeah, but I mean certainly I can have
if you could ask, perhaps if someone in the department could send a note up to the committee, we can share it among members.
Yeah, on that, right, okay. Thanks. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, anyone else? Any questions? No, I don't doubt there's a lot of detail being absorbed here, so I'm sure as we go through this and come back to some specific projects and specific issues that we'll be asking for further briefings in relation to this. But in the meantime, thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Item 6, matters arising, page 39 in the pack, is response from the former Department for Social Development to the former Committee for Employment and Learning's inquiry into post-special education need provision in education, employment and training for those with learning disabilities. It's in the packs. I'm not sure whether people have had an opportunity to read it or have any comments they wish to make, but it was a fairly substantial piece of work in the past. It relates to people who go beyond 19 and fall outside the education provision in relation to special education needs and what should happen. So can I suggest that we do come back to this maybe at a later date when we have a little bit of space in the work programme, because I wouldn't want to just see it fall off the edge of the table. There is an issue which may now come in towards us in terms of our committee responsibilities, and at the very least I think we responsibly ensure that it has been picked up wherever it needs to be picked up, if it is with us or with a different committee, then I think. So if members are content, we'll come back. Stephen?
Just give chapter and verse on this. Obviously the outgoing Committee for Employment and Learning did an inquiry on the post-19 situation. It is very much a cross-cutting issue. There's health, there's infrastructure issues around transport, and obviously with education. But the Employment and Learning Committee ran with it in terms of the inquiry, took inputs from different committees. In parallel with that, whenever I was Minister, I took on the role within what's called the Bamford Mental Health Learning Disability Executive Subcommittee around the coordination of an action plan. So there's an action plan there at executive level, which, like many things, isn't fully resourced at this stage, but it's there. So there's about a third of the recommendations in the outgoing committee's inquiry would fall to probably the Department for the Economy now, but 2/3 would fall to other departments. We give a very quick readout back to the committee in the final meeting before the recess, just to formally discharge it before the committee structures changed. But definitely is a need for more deeper interrogation of that, and what came back from the department was very much a holding operation. Everyone was clear in that, so it's for something that is useful to follow up with, because in terms of parents, everyone just loathes a situation where departments just pass, that's different department X, department Y, so someone needs to try to take an overall look at it, so I certainly encourage you to do that in due course.
Yeah, no, and I think that's the intent. As I say, it is an important, and we all know the issue from our own constituency work. People who go beyond 19 and suddenly drop off the age of provision. And so I think even perhaps if Peter could talk to some of the other clerks to see if other committees in interest, are they looking? And I think between us, we'll try and coordinate as to where the lead in this lies and to ensure that it is reflected back into the executive to follow through on the action plan that you're talking about. But we'll come back to this at a later stage then.
Yeah, great, yeah, good.
Okay, thank you. The SR, the next item 7, we had looked at this last week. It's a follow-over from a previous committee's work, the SR in relation to the Posted Workers Enforcement of Employment Rights Regulations Northern Ireland 2016. It's the clerk's memos at page 3, the SR is at page 44. This is in the tabled pack, and the explanatory memorandum is page 5 in the tabled pack. The rules subject to negative resolution. We did discuss the SL1 at last week's meeting, but no comment on the rule. And the rule will come into operation on the 18th of June this month. Members will recall the timescale is short because it was discussed in Westminster over the pre-election period, and it's only in the last week or so that the SR has been drafted. And late transposition of this EU directive into law could mean infraction proceedings. So the Examiner Statutory Rules hasn't yet reported on the rules, so members will be agreeing to the legislation subject to the Examiner Statutory Rules report. So are members content that we put the question in relation to it?
Great.
Well, the question is that the Committee for the Economy has considered SR 2016-242, Posted Workers Enforcement of Employment Rights Regulations Northern Ireland 2016, and has no objection to the rules subject to the Examiner of Statutory Rules report. Are members agreed?
Great.
Great.
Thank you. The item is 8 is SL1 in the Mines Regulations Northern Ireland 2016. The clerk's memo was at page 45. The SL1 is at page 46. The rule transposes the European Directive 92/104/EEC onto the minimum requirements for improving the safety and health protection of workers in surface and underground mineral extracting industries. The department stated that the rule aims to protect people working at mines in the north by ensuring that there is a duty on the mine operator to manage and control the major hazards at mines. The regulations will replace the existing law with a single set of modern regulations that retain the necessary protection for mine workers and others, and clearly place duties on health to ensure health and safety on the mine operator. They also remove outdated and redundant legislation, prescription and duplication, so it is a kind of a tidying up exercise. The rule subject to negative resolution and the proposed date is November 2016. Now, I know Steve has asked maybe that we have a further briefing in relation to this. Do you want to consider, are we content with the policy implications, or do you want a further briefing first, or are we happy to, in principle, accept the policy implications of this, and then, perhaps a written briefing would be sufficient from the department, or I'm at the committee's hands in relation to this?
If I may, Mr. Chair, the reason for this is I've been talking to several people in the sort of the mining industry, and there is issues they're raising about this, and I don't feel as if I have sufficient information to actually be able to make a decision. And I would think I would imagine that other members of the committee are better informed on this issue than I am. But I would rather have a briefing on it before we move to the next stage.
Well, are members content that we ask for a written briefing in the first instance and see does that suffice, and then we'll return. It isn't due to come into operation in November, so we have some time to play with in relation to this.
Thank you.
We'll ask for a written briefing, and if that answers any of the questions, then we can move on to the regulation at that stage. Agenda item 9 is the control of electromagnetic fields at work regulations. The clerk's memo was at page 51. The SL itself is at page 52. The rule known as the Electromagnetic Fields Directive will implement Directive 2013/35/EU on the minimum health and safety requirements regarding the exposure of workers to the risks arising from physical agents, i.e. electromagnetic fields. The Department stated while existing legislation covers some of the requirements, the EMF Directive introduces new responsibilities for duty holders, most notably the requirement to assess the levels of EMF which their workers may be exposed against a set of specific thresholds. Only the requirements of the directive which go beyond are more specific than those covered by the existing legislation will be transposed. So the rule is subject to negative resolution, and proposed date of operation is the 1st of August this year. This is the committee's opportunity to consider the policy set out in the SL1. It's not possible to amend this once the rule has been made and laid out in the Assembly Business Office. Are members content with the policy implications of the proposed legislation? Agreed?
Yeah.
Okay. The agenda item 18 is another SL, the Industrial Training Levy Construction Industry Order, Northern Ireland 2016. Clerk's memo is at page 67 of the tabled pack, and the SL is at page 68 of the tabled pack. The order enables the construction industry training board, is it?
Yes,
training board. To fulfil its role in raise funding through a levy of employees in the industry. The purpose of the board is to encourage the adequate training of those employed or intend to be employed in the construction industry. The rule gives effect to the proposal submitted by the board to the department to continue the levy on employers in the construction industry for the purpose of raising money towards the expenses of the board. The levy is to be imposed in respect of the 52nd levy period.
Second year.
Right. Commencing on the 1st of September and ending on the 31st of August 2017. This is obviously a levy that the construction industry can place on members to try and raise funds for themselves to put in place training, on, particularly obviously in relation to health and safety and other issues facing the industry. So the rule subject to negative resolution, proposed date of operation is the 31st of August. And again, I ask members, are we content with the policy implications in relation to it? It's really a continuation of the levy which is applied.
Just through the chair, one of the things we might have to consider is a lot of companies, because of the new apprenticeship levy being presented nationally and the fact that that's having in business, one of the things we might consider as a committee going forward is the next stage. I'm quite content for this to go forward at this stage, but next year, because there will be, you know, the companies will be paying a proper apprenticeship sort of level, plus this as well. There's a significant issue in Northern Ireland about sort of what they see as double taxation on this issue.
Yeah, although I imagine this levy is at one element apprenticeships, but probably another element various other aspects of requirements and
Chair,
health and safety.
just to reinforce that, it'd be worthwhile discussing with them some stage in the autumn the future of CITB, because as Steve has outlined, there's been a training levy in the construction sector for, as you can see from the thing, for the best part of 50 years. There's a separate CITB for Great Britain, there's one in Northern Ireland. That model is now essentially been overtaken by essentially a similar skills levy applied to all businesses. So this is going to create an issue for the future of what is an NDPB at the department. So it's worth revisiting this at some stage, and they'll be more than happy to engage with the committee around the matter.
But what we will do is we'll have a note of that. I suppose what we'd want to ensure is what is coming in under the apprenticeship levy, is there areas that are covered under this levy that are then left out? And if so, where they've been picked up? So I think we will return to this. We're content for this year anyway. It's an annual thing. And the implications of the apprentice levy will not check in before that. So if members are content with the policy implications for this year, and we'll certainly return in terms of what impact the apprentice levy has on this. Is it, as you suggest, perhaps a double taxation, but it may well leave elements out which are covered under this levy anyway, and then where do they lie from there on in? Okay, members agreed?
Yeah.
Thank you. No, fair enough.
Something else.
All right. It's lucky it's not an auction, you would have bought something. Agenda item 10, Health and Safety Executive for Northern Ireland, consultation on revised approved code of practice, safety of pressure systems. The consultation is at page 57. This approved code of practice has been revised to bring it up to date and to improve ease of understanding for readers. The consultation invites views on the revised advice provided and associated guidance material, and the closing date is the 31st of August. Again, as a position we've adopted, I suppose, over the last number of weeks, that the committee content to reserve their position and act as a super consultee when we see responses from other interested parties. This. Okay,
great.
Again, the item 11, Health and Safety Executive consultation on another revised code of practice, safe use of lifting equipment. This has been revised to bring it up to date, to accommodate amendments relating to new legal requirements, and to make it clearer and easier to understand for users. The consultation takes views on the advice proposed and the guidance material, and it again closes on the 31st of August. Again, a similar position. Are we content to see consultation responses and adopt a position at that stage? Fair enough, thank you. Another health and safety executive consultation on.
Suppose we do the same again, Chair.
What's that?
Suppose we do the same again.
Okay. Well, just for the record, I'll
He needs to read it.
I'll read into the record what it is.
Yeah.
We're going okay. We're ahead of schedule. So this is safe work in confined spaces. This might apply to us. Confined spaces regulation. This has again been revised to bring it up to date, accommodate amendments relating to new legal requirements and make it clear and more understandable. Again, it applies to the 31st of August, and I again suggest that we take the same position of receive a summary of responses and act as a super consultee in this position. Agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Shorter meeting.
The Public Appointments Annual Report is at page 168. This is a substantial enough document, and it goes into some detail in relation to public appointments, and bear in mind that there are a number of arm's length bodies associated with the Department for the Economy, and from the old, I suppose, DEL and the old DETI as well. The report will appear in next week's pack. So suggest that we give people, because it's only arrived in this week's pack, suggest that we give people a week. I know we're in the Science Park for a meeting next week, but if people have a week to have a look through it, because there are matters arise in relation to appointments, and as I say, there's a substantial number of arm's length bodies in relation to our committee remit. And I think it's worth members having a look through that to see if there are any issues arise, and we will give an opportunity for commentary next week on it, and if people want to study it further, we can certainly come back to that at a later date. But it's just,
could I just make a comment? If I could just declare it, I'm not sure really that it's an interest, but prior to being elected, I was a member of SRC Board of Governors, so I'll feature in this just to
Fine job you did as well.
Thank you.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I think those are valid points in relation to, obviously, we're working almost, this is 14, 15, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, now there's been some changes to some of them, but when you read through some of them, the disparity that there is in terms of their enumeration, there are some organisations, I have to say, that need a serious looking at in terms of what they're being remunerated for, number of staff they have, the little outcomes that they give us. So I think it would do members all good to take it away and to have a really good look at just some of these bodies and ask the question, what are they doing?
And Chair, might I add, the gender balance jumped out immediately at me also, worth consideration.
Yeah. Well, as I say,
not enough men. I would think that's probably the case.
It's highly unlikely, but let's take it away and have a look at it next week. Maybe the next week we decide that we want to get some of the officials in to go through some of the issues that we're raising, or in writing and put some issues to the department and ask for a response. But it is an opportunity to have a look. As Mervyn has said, there are issues in relation to remuneration, and as Sinead said, issues in relation to gender balance, and issues in relation to the organisations themselves and how they do their business. So there's quite a lot in it, and I think it's worth having a longer look at. So members are content to come back to it next week? Okay. Thank you. Correspondence, there is an index at page 423, and maybe Peter could just talk us through.
Chair, there are 3 items on the correspondence index. There's a request to brief the committee from the Construction Employers Federation, and we're going to come back to that in the next item. There is an invitation from the Ulster Grand Prix, an event there. The invitation's just after the index. And also there is a further letter from the Ulster Farmers Union on the narrow closure, and again we're already dealing with that issue, so we're asking members to note that with the invitations, if members want to have a look at those, and then let us know whether or not they're able to attend.
Okay. The Ofcom devolution measures for Northern Ireland, again I'll ask Peter to speak to this.
Yeah, members will recall perhaps that Ofcom has been the subject of some discussion around the increased devolution for Scotland and Wales from the Smith and Silk reports, and it had been agreed that both Scotland and Wales would be able to appoint a member to the Ofcom board. That parity has now been offered to Northern Ireland as well, and that's what the Minister's correspondence is about. So essentially what that will mean is the Executive will oversee a process for recruitment of a Northern Ireland board member to the Ofcom board. It will also mean that the Ofcom lays its accounts and annual reports in front of the Assembly, allowing Assembly committees to have full scrutiny of those as well. There will also be a further memorandum of understanding between Ofcom, the Executive, the Assembly and the Department for Culture, Media and Sport around giving the bodies in Northern Ireland a privileged consultation role. So it essentially brings in for Northern Ireland all of the elements that have effectively come out of the Smith and Silk reports for Scotland and Wales. The other thing I would flag up, members may not be aware of this because broadcasting isn't a devolved matter, but with the new BBC Royal Charter coming in at the start of next year, the discussion is now around Ofcom being the regulatory body for the BBC. So having a local board member on Ofcom from now as a parity measure will be useful in that situation. It will allow a local voice to have a part in the regulation of the BBC going forward from next year. So it's really just to let members know, and that's what the Minister's correspondence deals with, if members are content or have any questions.
Okay, fair enough. Just for information, the draft, item 15 is the draft forward work group. Sorry, the Construction Employers Federation, will
Yes.
accommodate that in the draft
Yes,
forward work
we'll
group? Members are
bring
content.
that forward. They've asked if we can take briefing from them, but they're quite keen we go down to their premises as well, so we can work on it if members are content.
They have particular issues in relation to skills
Yes.
and training that they've been flagging up for some time, which direct relevance, I suppose, on the conversation we were having with officials earlier. The draft work programme is at page 65. Are members content to agree that draft work programme? Of course, it can be amended as we go along if issues arise, but that's the broad sense of it. Stephen?
Just on, I'm conscious we're getting briefings from the universities next week, and obviously it's a very particular issue with them. Just check with Peter, are we looking to get colleges NI in at some stage?
Yeah, we had actually hoped to get colleges NI in before the summer recess, but just the way the scheduling worked, it wasn't going to be possible. We have them scheduled.
I don't think they have met to probably agree what they're going to brief us.
We've
they have a scheduled meeting.
Yes, as well. So we have penciled them in for the schedule going forward. If you have a look there on the 14th of September, we've got that in just in red at the minute. We're just hopeful of that. The other one, Chair, I wanted to draw members' attention to is we talked about the strategy session that the committee will have at the start of September to develop key strategic priorities going forward and the sort of outputs the committee want to arrive at. We're looking at doing that in Armagh. We'd asked Invest for some suggestions around a company that was doing something that might be quite interesting for committee to see. And we're now developing a day around that where there would be a strategy session, but there would also be a committee meeting to get us off and running fairly early, where there'd be a briefing from Invest and I about the particular company that we would look at, and also possibly a briefing from the FSB about issues facing small businesses, because it fits in again with the visit. So just to flag that up to members, that would be the 7th of September, and we'd obviously clear the items of correspondence from over the summer recess then as well.
But people just pencil that in their diary, and if there's a particular difficulty, if we find there's a huge difficulty with the date time, we'll obviously have to look at it again.
Where are you thinking of going?
Armagh.
Where to?
I don't want to mention the company just yet, because
okay.
we still have to set that down, but it's in members' pack there. But it's a company that is both expanding its home market, but also moving towards export and trying to get into the whole superfoods, health foods, all those kind of things. It's expanding quite rapidly. So, as I say, I don't want to name them just yet because we still have to sort out the details. But
That's the way that you
area.
talked about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we would do the strategy session and we'd have a meeting and a visit as well.
Sounds quite a long session, though, does it?
We might split it, but I talked to members further about that, how we manage that throughout the day.
Yeah.
We have a strategy. Don't worry, we do have a strategy.
Just will there other committees be meeting that week?
Possibly not. The This is the week before plenary starts, but I would imagine some are looking at that being the week of the strategy session, and it depends on where they're doing those, but we'll try and coordinate as much as we can on that to minimise any difficulties, disruption or duplication.
It would be a good half day, anyway, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
And you'll be looked after in County Armagh.
We'll do our best, I'm sure you will.
Okay, thanks. So, members agree the forward work programme? Happy, content?
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Item 16 is any other business. There's no items submitted unless somebody has something pressing they wish to raise. Okay. Just to remind you, next week again, it's 10 o'clock in the Science Park, and if we can be there at 4:10 and get the meeting started, then because there's quite a lot
Sure, yeah.
in it. There's a couple of briefings.
Pack went out yesterday with bits and pieces around the visit and maps and things like that. But as Mr. Dunn has already said, if you aim for the Titanic Centre, keep going past it on your right, go past the studios, and it's kind of just after that. You can't miss it.
It's on the left, though.
Yes, on the left.
Yeah.
Yeah. Depending on which direction you're coming from, yes.
Which is on the left now? Just Titanic Centre, because I had
They're all on the left.
I had it in my head that it was, if you go to
If you're coming from town, it's on the
Titanic
left.
Centre's on your right, you could be in the lock.
Because
If the Titanic Centre, you've missed it.
the Titanic will be on the left.
Right, so it has to be on your left.
Continue down the road to the end, it's on the left.
Probably confused everyone now, so but
Just
there will
look
be
at
a map.
the map.
There'll be a map.
Sat nav, if you have it.
And just on that, we're doing universities, and is that it?
Yeah, we've got the two universities. The Science Park will also brief on some innovations they're having
Yeah.
next week.
We've been there before, but yeah.
And it will, they're rebranding and repackaging what they do, so we'll get a bit of insight about
Good.
that.
And there's a lunch at 1 o'clock.
Yes.
And for the briefing through the lunch, isn't there?
There'd be a chance to meet the companies that are located in the Science Park, the various client companies there, and also a chance to look at what's been done with the pump house in terms of tourism, and also the dry dock beside it. So it's quite interesting. There's been a lot of change over the last couple of years. So if anyone hasn't seen it in a while, there's been an awful lot of work done there.
So members should really be aiming from 10 o'clock through to about 1:30, possibly 2 o'clock.
I know, that's right.
If they can, accommodate that. I appreciate there are other committees in the afternoon, some people might be stretched, but anyway, that's roughly the time frame. Okay, thanks very much. We'll see you all next Wednesday morning in the Science Park. Thank you.
29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29.